Did you know that some translations of the Harry Potter books didn't simply translate the work directly to their given languages, but also took great pains in adapting pun and joke names to make them funny for kids in different countries? The man responsible for the Norwegian translations, Torstein Bugge Høverstad, has had a long career of translating novels to Norwegian, having translated everything from The Lord of the Rings to Shakespeare. His work on the Harry Potter books netted him several awards, and they might not have been quite as popular as they were in Norway if they had a more direct bare bones translation like the Swedish one. It always seemed strange to me as a kid whenever I heard Swedish people talk about Harry Potter. The Swedish and Norwegian languages are very similar to each other, to the point where we can easily communicate. But I was so used to the names in the Norwegian books being altered, it always seemed like the Swedes were kinda speaking half English every time they mentioned Dumbledore or Hogwarts or whatever. So I figured it could be fun to go through each and every name presented in the Norwegian version of Harry Potter. And maybe, hopefully, I'll be able to teach you some Norwegian along the way. I'll only be covering works translated by Torstein Bugge Høverstad, so any characters that were only named in the movies, on Rowling's Pottermore website, or in any other supplemental or adaptational material, like any of the games, that were not entirely translated by Høverstad on his own, will not be on this list. This includes later added first names for characters who in the books are only ever referred to by their surnames, like a bunch of the Hogwarts professors. I will also not be covering all of the parents without first names, but with surnames the exact same as their kids, because I don't really see a point of mentioning every Mr. and Mrs. whatever that I can think of. And finally, I'm not going to look up how to pronounce any of these names. And sometimes I'll even mispronounce them deliberately in the same way I know I would have when I read them as a child and teen. It's not gonna be exactly the same as a Norwegian child would read these names, but it's gonna have to be close enough. Norwegians, try not to cringe too hard. There are 71 names in the Norwegian translation that are completely unchanged. Harry Potter, Bane, Ronan, Norberta, Cho-Chang, Fridwulfa, Carcus, Magorian, Nagini, Madame Rosmerta, Tom, Fleur, Gabrielle and Apolline de la Cure, Antonin Dolohov, Niklas and Panel Flamel, Gellert Grindelwald, Padma and Parvati Patil, Agnes, Bob, Dennis, Gordon, Ted, Yvonne, Ali Bashir, Arnold, Janus Tikli, Musag, Ragnok, Hermes, Barufio, Agrippa, Merlin, Morgana, Arcus Livius, Luxias, Madame Malkin, Dai Levelin, Honoria, Tiberius, Natalia MacDonald, Bertrand de Panses Profundes, Lisette de Lapin, Sankt Mungo, Pierre Bonacord, Paracelsus, Cleodna, Cecilia, Marius, Odo, Olympe Maxime, Igor Karkaroff, Blaise Sabini, Albus Severus Potter, Voldemort, nearly all players for both the Bulgarian and the Irish Quidditch teams of the 1994 World Cup, and the Egyptian referee Hassan Mustafa. 60 of the names are also just one-to-one translations, or are otherwise too similar to be of note, so let's just quickly get those out of the way too. We have Skeivskank, Hedvig, Fiola, Blodbaronen, Lily Potter, August Nask, Amelia, Susanna and Edgar Beining, Remus Lupus, Madame Knipe, Madame Nestle, Professor Snilhorn, Professor Stickling, Professor Vector, Blunka, Lavendel Brun, Mikkel Kroken, Vincent Krabbe, Marietta Egelkam, Antonius Goldstein, Bertram Butt, Hokla, Liana, Humberto den Store, Arabella Dora Fig, Gregorovic, Angelica Johnson, Viktor Krum, Volkanov, Vladislav Semushki, Silvanus Kedelbrenn, Olivander, Helena Ravnklo, Marcus Belby, Damokles Belby, Martha Verita, Roger Davidsen, Marcus Flint, Vicky Frobelius, Olivia Horn, Marsk, Octavius Pepper, Polyakov, Herr Robertsen, Skarpin, Fylidia Spore, Sommer, Emmerich Skift, Agatha Tim, Cassandra Wablatski, Rosi Seller, Ragnok den Første, Emmerich den Onde, Elfrik den Ivrige, Urg den Ureine, Urik den Einstøe, Skogruk den Skjeggete, and Sideman DJ Puff. Then we have 15 common normal-sounding British names that have just been changed to other names that are probably easier to pronounce for Norwegian children, mostly but not entirely of Nordic origin. We have Fru Hansen, Gwennog Hansen, Hestia Hansen, Hanna Abom, Johan Abelin, Stig Abelsen, Odd Kaspersen, Katti Bull, John Dandel, Veronica Flatland, Ulrik, Didrik, Trulte, Kurt, and Clara. The remaining 342 translated names are much more interesting. Hermione Granger is named Hermine Grang in Norwegian. Grang is a traditional but now outdated Norwegian pronunciation of the Anglo-French word grand. There's even a famous hotel in Oslo named Grand Hotel, which a lot of older people especially just call Grang. So Grang brings to mind a sense of upper class and properness, and Hermione is definitely more upper class than both of her friends. Poppy Pomfrey is named Pussy Pomfrit. Pussy is probably meant to be a reference to the Norwegian word pussig, meaning weird, and probably not a reference to the English word for cat. Pomfrey is one of the most used words for French fries in Norway, being short for pommes frites. So her full name means weird French fries, or possibly pus inside French fries. Miriam Strout is Miriam Strudel, keeping with the food theme for healers. Gilbert Wimpel is Gilbert Wimpel, but while a wimpel is a medieval form of female head covering, the Norwegian wimpel is a pennon. The fat lady is den trinne damen, with trin being a much more polite way of saying fat, more like portly. Similarly, the fat friar is den trinne munken. We don't really have a word for friar in Norwegian, so he's just a regular monk. The Nick in Nesten Hodeløse Nick is spelled like our word for a nod, which is a pretty good pun considering. His full name is also Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Toppington, instead of de Mimsy Porpington. Fang is hog, and is probably named that as a shortened version of hoggtenner, which is the Norwegian word for fangs. But just hog by itself like that actually means chop, which I guess means you could translate hoggtenner as shopping teeth in English. Firenze is Florence. Firenze is the Italian name of the Italian city of Florence, which we spell as Florence with an S in Scandinavia, but we mostly use the name Firenze in Norway. Fluffy is Nussi, which is kinda like kissy, which is cute. While pigvigeon is an obscure English word that can be used to describe a small or petty person or creature. Tullerusk means crazy and silly. Google Translate claims that tullerusk means bullshit, which is in itself bullshit. Sir Gedogan is Riddar Kalagal, Riddar being the Norwegian word for knight, and the gal in Kalagal referring to how he's crazy. Moaning Myrtle is Stønnestine, Stønne being the Norwegian word for moaning and groaning, and Stine being a very normal Norwegian name that was switched in to have that same alliteration quality of the name as Moaning Myrtle has. Sirius Black's last name is Svart, which is just the Norwegian word for black, but with an extra A. 2 A's in a row usually indicates an Å in Norwegian, especially when interacting with systems or people who are unfamiliar with the special letter. Like when the famous footballer Haaland changed his name to Haaland. Do that conversion with Svart and you get Svårt, which is Swedish for difficult. Sirius Black did have a very difficult life after all, and you are meant to think he's a scary bad man at first, so the double meaning of black and difficult could possibly have been intentional. Phineas Nigellus Black is Phineas Persilius Svart. Persilius is an extremely uncommon surname in Indonesia, but it also reminds me of the Norwegian word persille, which means parsley. There's also an ancient Roman stain removal seller from the German comic book series Mosaic, where his name was a reference to the popular laundry detergent brand Persil. Eladora Black is Eladora Svart, and Sirius's brother is called Regulus Arcturus Svart, making his acronym RAS instead of RAB, which is plot relevant. RAS spells out ras, which means avalanche, by the way, of both the snowy and rocky variety, which is probably not relevant actually. Rupert Axbanger Brooke Stanton is Rupert Adelkamp Snuffle. Since this was one of many possible RABs or RASs in the Norwegian version, this name had to be changed to keep in line with that acronym. Adelkamp means noble fight, and a snuffle is a very uncommon word for a rude guy. Rosalind Antigone Bungs is Rosalinde Antigone Sniffs, another RAB-RAS change, with sniffs being a combination of sniff, same as in English, and snuffs, which means and is an onomatopoeia of snivel. Aunt Petunia is still Petunia, but the Norwegian name for the Dursley family is Dumling, which sounds very similar to the word dumming, a very tame kindergarten insult which means stupid. Uncle Vernon is Victor, Marjorie is Magen, and Dudley is Dudleif, which isn't really a real name, but follows an old naming convention from the Middle Ages, which a lot of people now find silly, which involves sticking Leif at the end of another name, the Leif part specifically meaning descendant. So technically, his full name means Dud descendant stupid person. James Potter is renamed Jacob Potter, possibly because this is a slightly more common name in Norway. But by that logic, the books should have been called Harald Potter. Professor Binns is Professor Kiste, which means casket, which is very fitting for the only ghost to teach at Hogwarts. Terry Booth is Tom Blom. In real life, Tom Blom was a famous Dutch television and radio presenter, while Tom Blom was a famous Norwegian football player. But more importantly, Tom Blom is just fun to say. Mandy Brocklehurst is Amanda Brunkenberg. Brunkenberg might be named after the Norwegian village of Brunkeberg in Telemark, or possibly the Battle of Brunkeberg near Stockholm, Sweden, which was part of the Dano-Swedish War of 1970 and 71. Dobby is named Noldus, which is a synonym for idiot, and I have no idea what he did to deserve that. Then we have Albus Dumbledore as Albus Humlesnurr. Humle meaning bumblebee and snurr meaning spin. So basically, bumblebee whirl. Humle can also mean hops, so that could be an additional reason why he's so whirly. In Dumbledore's family, Aberforth is Abriom Humlesnurr, Ariana is Ariana Humlesnurr, Kendra is Kendra Humlesnurr, and Percival is Percival Humlesnurr. Flitwick's name, Pirrevimp, brings to my mind the word Spirrevip, which is a playful name for a small person or animal. Grubblyplank is Gnureplank, which means rub plank, but specifically in the way you would rub wood to sand it. Gudrik Griffing simply dropped the door ending after the Norwegian word for griffin, simply griff, and replaced it with a more Norwegian ing ending. His first name is also spelled more Norwegian. Hagrid's name is Gygrid. Gygar are female giants in Norse mythology, and rid is to ride. So since the name Hagrid comes from being hag-ridden, it's actually even more fitting that Gygrid is named after what his father did to help conceive him. Madam Hooch is named Hop, Hop being the Norwegian word for jump, as in jumping on her broom. It could possibly also be a reference to hops in beer, going with the Hooch team, but as mentioned, hops is humla in Norwegian, so I'm not sure. Hufflepuff is Håsblås. Hås is a variation of the more common hes, which is the Norwegian word for being hoarse. And blås is to blow, so Håsblås means to blow hoarsely. Gilderoy Lockhart is Gyldenpris Gullmedal, which means Golden Prince Gold Medal, although it's spelled differently. Ludo Bagman is Ludo Humbug, which is actually a pun on the English word humbug. And his brother Otto is still named Otto. Cornelius Fudge is Cornelius Bluff, with bluff being a sound-like to bluff, as in to bluff. Arnold Peasgood goes from being good at peeing to being good at panting. Pesegod. Cuthbert Mockridge becomes Herbert Hildring, Hildring being the Norwegian word for mirage. Nymphadora Tonks is Dult, which is like a friendly little shove or poke, often by elbowing someone's arm. Her mother is still Andromeda, and her father Edvard Tonks is Theodore Dult. The change from Edvard to Theodore was probably because it's not as known here in Norway that Ted or Teddy can be used as a nickname for Edward. Ron Weasley is named Ronny Wiltersen, Wilter meaning to be wild and lively. So the best way to translate Ronny Wiltersen back to English would probably be Ron Wildling. In English, his middle name Bilius was probably given to him to honor his late uncle Bilius, but his Norwegian middle name Colerius probably comes from the uncommonly used word kolerisk, meaning aggressive, impetuous and hot-blooded, which can often be a good description of Ron. His large family consists of Arthur, Molly, Rulle, Kalle, Gulla, Perry, Fred and Frank Wiltersen. Aunt Muriel is Murre, which means to unhappily growl at something. And Uncle Bilius is Krank. Krank can mean the same as a bike crank in English, with the Norwegian word for bike being sykkel. Krank can also mean sick, mostly in German, but you can find the word in Norwegian dictionaries as well. But the much more common Norwegian word for sick is syk. Saint Catchpole, the namesake of Ottery Saint Catchpole, the town where the Weasley family lives, is Sankt Veit, while Veit is a real surname, and Norwegian for a ditch or small passageway. It's also a very common dialectal word for know. Eg veit meaning I know. Additionally, the Ottery in the town's name referring to being located near the river Otter in Devon, just like the real word Ottery St. Mary, was translated as Ildering, Ilder meaning ferret. So in the Norwegian version of the books, I think it can be safe to assume that the Weasley family lives next to the Ferret River. Kingsley Shacklebolt is Nestor Bindelbolt, in reference to the wise king Nestor from Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. His last name means binding bolt, which means pretty much the same as Shacklebolt. McGonagall is changed to McSnurp. To be snurpete is to crumple your face into a snarky, unhappy expression. So this is very fitting for Minerva. Alistair Moody is Alastor Bistar, which means dreadful and threatening. His nickname, Mad-Eye, is just a direct translation to Galøye. While the name Quirrell may possibly be some sort of mix between quarrel and squirrel, Krangle is a play on krangle, which means to argue or quarrel. While Rasla Ravnklo's last name is a direct translation from Ravenclaw, Rasla means to rustle, as in leaves or paper, perhaps referencing the Ravenclaw's predisposition for book smarts. Snape is slur, slu being the Norwegian word for cunning, and lur meaning clever. His father is still named Tobias, and his mother, Eileen Prince, is Elinor Prince, which is closer to the Norwegian spelling of Prince, which was better for the reveal of Snape being the half-blood prince, partly named after his mother. Slytherin is named Smygar, after Smygar, which is either the word for someone who sneaks, or for a soundless fart. I'm pretty confused as to how Sybil Trelawney became Rakel Rummelfjoll. Changing the first name to a slightly more normal Norwegian name is one thing, but does Rummel refer to rumbling? Or perhaps to the author R.J. Rummel? And is fuel in the name because of the flower or the instrument perhaps? Either way, none of these options seems to fit the character. If anyone has any idea about this one, let me know down in the comments. Also, Cassandra Trelawney is Cassandra Rummelfjoll. Eleanor Brandstone is Alan Brannemann. While also a uncommon surname in Germany, Brannemann refers to the word brandmann, meaning fireman, which was the old gendered term for firefighters in Norway, which has since been replaced by the gender-neutral brandkonstabel, which translates to fire constable. Penelope Clearwater is Pernille Klarvang, which translates to Clear Meadow. Colin Creevy is Frodrik From. While From is a real surname, Frodrik doesn't seem to be a real name anywhere I could find at least. It does go well with his surname though. I guess it could be a mix of the name Fredrik and the word Frodi, but that word doesn't really describe him in my opinion. From with one M also means something like good-hearted, which is a somewhat better fit at least. Although Dilton is a real name, I think it actually refers to the Norwegian word dilte, which means to mindlessly follow someone around, which I feel fits quite well for both him and his brother. Also, in combination with his last name, you can sort of hear the English phrase to and from in the name Diltun from. Cedric Diggory is Fredrik Jervel, which is an old word for brave, and his father Amos is renamed to Anton. Seamus Finnegan becoming Joachim Finneman is a wild change, but I have no idea what his name is supposed to mean. Joachim Funnyman? Finny like the dialectal word for found? No idea. Seamus's cousin Fergus is Fingus, presumably so that his full name could be Fingus Finneman, although his surname is never actually stated. Gregory Goyle's Norwegian name is Grylius Gurgel. To gryle can either mean to grumble or shriek like a pig, while Gurgel literally means to gargle. Neville Longbottom is Nilus Langballe, which means long ball, but very specifically in the way you would refer to a testicle. Like the Norwegian word for a ball is just ball, but if you say balle, that is talking about a singular testicle, while ballar is the plural for both balls and testicles. Now, this could be intended as being short for rumpeballar, ass balls, which is what we call ass cheeks. But divorced from the knowledge that the character's original name is Longbottom, nobody would ever consider that over just thinking that he has long testicles. In the Longbottom family, Alice is Alinda Langballe, Frank is still Frank, Augusta still Augusta, Enid is Agnes, and Algie is Albert Langballe. Malcolm Baddock is Hugo Ballaram. While Ballaram is also a fairly uncommon name in Trinidad and Tobago, I wonder if the name Baddock made Høverstad think of the word bollock, and if that is the reason that he brings up balls yet again through the word balle. Ram can mean a few different things, but for this I think it was intended to mean a hard hit or strike. So this name is basically a reference to a nutshot. Luna Lovegood is Luna Luneskjær. Since people at Hogwarts call Luna Loony, her name in Norwegian needed to be able to be mocked in a similar manner. Hence, we have Lulla, which can be mocked as Skrulla, similarly referencing her seemingly crazy personality. Luna means mood, but Lun can also mean like warm and comfy. Skjær can mean loving or loved. And Xenophilius Lovegood is Xenophilius Luneskjær. Malfoy has been changed to Malfang, which fits well with the snake imagery of Slytherin. The first names of Draco, Lucius, Narcissa and Abraxas are all intact. Tom Marvolo Riddle is of course an anagram of I am Lord Voldemort, but translating this phrase to Jeg Fyrst Voldemort would destroy the anagram. So his name was changed to Tom Dredolo Venstar, which anagrams to Voldemort den Store or Voldemort the Great, which I like much more anyway, even if his name no longer hints at a riddle to be solved. This is probably the most changed name across all the different translations of the books, exactly because that anagram had to change with each language. So we have Tom Elvis Chedusa in France, Tom Gus Mervolo Dolder in Sweden, Romeo G. Detlev Jr. in Denmark, Anton Morvol Hert in Greece, Tom Roll Denham in Hungary, Trevor Delgome in Iceland, and so many more. I'm sure I mispronounced all of these. And Tom Riddle Sr. of course has to be Tom Venstar Sr. Sally Ann Perks is Anna Clara Pomp. Pomp means the same in Norwegian as in English, a ceremonial or festive display of magnificence and splendor. Lee Jordan is Laffen Styx. Laffen is an old nickname for Olaf and Olav, so, you know, Laffen. Not sure if Styx is from the band or the river though. Dean Thomas is Tommy Ding, which seems like Høverstad just picked names that sounded similar and then flipped them around. Oliver Wood is Oliver Quist, with Quist being the Norwegian word for a stick or twig. Grip hook is klotak, which means claw grip. Creature is krynkel, a portmanteau of creep and inkly. Creep can be translated as creep, but often means something closer to creepy crawlies, and inkly simply means pitiful. Archie is Archibald, which is also the Danish translation for the Archie comic book series, although not the Norwegian one. Avery is Avarsson, which supposedly means son of Avery, which is a very strange change. Peeves is Gnav. Gnav is a traditional Danish and Norwegian social game that has been played with either special cards or wooden pieces with similar motifs. One of the pieces is the Fool, or Narren in Norwegian, and that's the roundabout connection to the character of Peeves. Barty Crouch, both junior and senior, are called Kroek in Norwegian, which is most likely taken directly from a Dutch word meaning crook. But Barty's nickname is Bart in Norwegian, which means mustache. Bellatrix Lestrange is called Demons in Norwegian. The letters in Demons spell out the English word demons, but the Norwegian word for demons is demoner. Her husband Rodulfus is Rodulfus, and his brother Rabastan is Radamsus. Peter Pettigrew is Petter Pittelpytt. Pittel either referring to the word pitle, meaning to walk with tiny short steps, as a rat would, or to the word pitteliten, which is a dialectal version of bitteliten, which means tiny. Pit, on the other hand, is an interjection meant to convey indifference, and is possibly onomatopoeia for a spitting sound. His rat name, Scabbers, is as good as directly translated to Scorpus, which was also the name of a famous charioteer in Roman times. Rita Skeeter is Rita Slita, and while Slita is a variation on the word slita, meaning either to struggle or to wear out, the name is probably in reference to the word slitsom, meaning tiring. Emmeline Vance is Emmeline Vals, Vals being the Norwegian name for the dance called waltz. Bogrod is Grofnok. Grof could be grov, meaning coarse or rough. Nok means enough. Rough enough. Buckbeak is Bucknab, meaning rambeak, changing the mammal part of his name from a male deer to a male sheep. But the book should probably actually be translated to bow, since he likes bowing so much. His assumed identity of Witherwings is translated to Vimmelving. Vimmel isn't really a Norwegian word, but it does mean a large crowd of people in Swedish, and the Norwegian word vimle and svimmel both relates to being dizzy, but it could possibly just be that it sounded good. Gornuk is Kornuk, corn with a K being the Norwegian spelling of corn. Weird joke, but I think that's it. Grop is Gnurk, which is close in spelling to knurr, the Norwegian word for growl. Travers is Trassel, which means an entangled mess, and is also the Swedish name for tangled. Trevor is Tristan, which is a real name, but Trist also means sad, so you could read his name as Sad One. Skabior is Skabber, so apparently he stole the English name for Ron's rat. But Skabb is the Norwegian name for scabies, so Skabber would probably be the skin source you get from scabies. Hepzibah Smith is Hespetra Smutt. A hespetre is both the Norwegian word for a textile swift and an insult for a difficult woman, on par with the English bitch. And hespetre is mixed with the real Norwegian name Petra. Smutt is a seldom used word that have now mostly evolved into smatt, both meaning to slip, as in and out of small places. Zacharias Smith is also named Smutt. Batilda Bagshot is Batilda Bang, exchanging her surname with a sound a bagshot would probably make, which I find kinda funny. Millicent Bulstrode is Millie Bulling. Billing could mean either or be a mix of the English word bullying and the Norwegian word bylle, which means a boil. Charity Burbage is Carita Borre. Borre is the Norwegian name for the plant burdock, which also inspired the word borrelås, which means burdock lock, as in the Norwegian word for velcro. Frank Bryce is Frank Brask. Brask, which means to be loud and boorish, is most often used in the combination med brask og bram, with brask and bram, where bram means to be boastful. Alekto Caro is Alekto Missfall. Missfall is the same as a mishap or accident. In Swedish, missfall is the same as a miscarriage. Her brother Amacus is Argel Missfall. The word arg can mean malicious, horrible and angry. Reginald Cattermole is Mons Mulevarp. Mulevarp is almost identical to Muldvarp, which means mole. His family are Maria Elisabeth, Ellie, Alfred and Maiken Mulevarp. Dirk Creswell is Didrik Mosegrom. Mose means moss. Grom can mean something or someone great and highly regarded. But there is also a meaning linked to the word grim, which are a type of Nordic supernatural creatures. Daedalus Diggle is Daedalus Dølg. Dølg is an uncommon word which means to hide or keep secret, which is fitting for a member of the Order of the Phoenix. Armando Dippet is Armando Duppel. There's a few possibilities to what Duppel is referring to, but given his advanced age of over 200 years, I'm betting on the word duppe, which means to nod off. Elphias Doge is Elphias Dogger, which might tell you something about how he spends his free time, but is probably in reference to the word duggar, meaning to fog up. Miss Fig's cat, Mr. Tibbles, changed names between books from Snurf to Lusken. There's nothing in the text to indicate that these are the same cat in the Norwegian version, so I'm counting them separately. Snurf is possibly a mix between snufs, which means sniff, and smurf, or smurf. Lusken is a fairly common cat name in Norway and comes from the word luske, which means to sneak. Mrs. Fig's other cats only have one name each. Snowy is Snøhvit, which means Snow White. Mr. Paws is Putulf, with Put meaning paw and Ulf being a Nordic name that derives from the Old Norse word for wolf. And Tufty is Svins, which means to saunter, which cats do quite a lot of. Justin Finch Fletchley is Julius Finkenfjær, which means finch feather. Mundungus Fletcher is Mundungus Styrfeder. I'm a bit unsure about this one. Styr can mean something like control or operate, but it can also mean something closer to hullabaloo or fuss. Feder is father in Icelandic, but it is also feather in German, which would fit well because the feathers in an arrow is called the fletchling. Put them together and you sort of get the meaning of someone who is working on an arrow, which is what a fletcher does. There are so many dialects in Norway that while this felt very unintuitive to me, someone else might have gotten this immediately. His nickname Dyng means heap and is mostly used as part of the word søppeldynge, meaning trash heap. Benji Fenwick is Benjamin Fylling, which means filling, or fill, as in landfill, with the word søppelfylling. Marvolo Gaunt is Dredolo Mørk. His first name had to change to fit with the translated Voldemort anagram, since Tom was partially named after him, and the word mørk means dark in Norwegian. Merope Gaunt is Miseria Mørk, Miseria being Spanish for misery. Morfin Gaunt is Morphus Mørk. Both these first names bring to mind morphing, although there could possibly be some other reasoning here, as I don't see how that's relevant to this character. Daphne Greengrass is Daphnia Grønbekk. One of the intricacies of the Norwegian language is that we have two official written languages. Bokmål, which I'll translate to book speech, and Nynorsk, meaning New Norwegian. I may get into the interesting history behind that another time, but I'm bringing it up now because grøn, with that spelling, means green in New Norwegian, but the almost 90% of Norwegians who write in book speech would spell it with two N's. Bek is pitch, the byproduct of tar distillation, or possibly beck with two K's, meaning a stream. Fenrir Greyback is Fenris Vargar. The Fenris wolf, or the Fenrir wolf in English for some reason, is a giant world-ending wolf from Norse mythology, and one of Loki's children. Vargar means wolves in New Norwegian, and the same in book speech, except it's Vargar, and the word ulver is much more commonly used. Mafalda Hopkirk is Mafalda Hopstok. The word hoppestok consists of hoppe, which means jumping, and stock, which means cane. But hoppestok is actually the Norwegian name for a pogo stick. Bertha Jorkins is Bertha Flurp. I think this is literally just a funny sound. Walden McNair is Volmar McKnife. Not in Norwegian, you understand, just McKnife in English. Absolutely perfect. Volme means when something pours out or whirls up. But I would have actually preferred it if his first name had stayed as Valden, because Valden with a V means the violence in certain parts of Norway, being spelled with an O instead of an A in the rest of the country. Having his name be the Violence McKnife would have been the only way to improve this name. Griselda Marshbanks is Grinella Marsboom. Green can be used like the English grin, but usually means cry. Mars is both the planet and the month of March, and boom could either mean boom, miss, or bargate. Not sure what he was going for here. Ernie Macmillan is Ernst Maltman, changing one brand of scotch for another. Eloise Midgen is Elise Knotten. Knotter is Norwegian for bumps, usually in relation to objects like the underside of football shoes. But it fits Eloise quite well, since she has a recurring pimple problem. EN endings in Norwegian words is the same as putting a "the" at the start of an English word, so her name is literally Elise the Bump. Cormac McLagan is Colon McMurk. Even for someone as shitty as Cormac, renaming someone to Colon is pretty harsh, even though the word is usually spelled with a K in Norwegian. But the merk in McMark, on the other hand, just means notice or mark. Graham Montague is Goffen Røsli. Røslig means big and muscular. Theodore Knott is Theodore Knock. Knock is an arrow knock, but drop a K and you get enough. Bob Ogden is Bostolf Ockermann. Bost may be related to the word bust, meaning bristle, the short stiff hair on an animal or brush. The word bustete then came to mean shaggy. Ulf is a variation on Ulf, meaning wolf, so his full first name means shaggy wolf. While Ockermann is also just a slight variation on the real Netherlands surname of Ockermann with one N. To okke or akke also means to whine and complain in Norwegian, usually involving making the sounds ok and ak. And mann is the Norwegian spelling of man, so shaggy wolf complaining man. His possible relative Tiberius Ogden is Tiberius Ockermann. Pansy Parkinson is Petrea parkasen. Petrea is a genus of evergreen flowering vines, native to the tropical Americas. Parkasen means the parka, as in the hooded winter coat. Sturgis Podmore is Styrian Pommer, whose name seems to be made up of two areas from mainland Europe. A Styrian would be someone from the Austrian state of Styria, and a Pommer or Pomeranian would be someone from Pomerania, the historical region on the southern shore of the Baltic Sea in Central Europe. I swear I've also heard Styrian been used for someone who is stressing about, coming from the word styre, not connected to Styria at all, but I could find no examples of this online or in any dictionary. Let me know if I'm crazy or what. Apollyon Pringle is Apollyon Pling, which means ding. If you were wondering, we do have Pringles in Norway, so I'm not sure why he didn't just go with that. Demelza Robbins is Distel Robertson. Distel is German for tistel, which is tistel in Norwegian. Augustus Rockwood is Augustus Rotten Roll, his surname being a mix of the word rotten, meaning the rat, and the phrase rock and roll. Thorfinn Roll is Torfinn Røvle. Vrøvle means to talk nonsense, but it also seems like Høverstad just liked adding the letter Ø to Death Eater names, probably because of the letter being in the word død, the Norwegian word for death. Along those lines, Albert Runkorn is Albert Mortmann. Mort is of course death in French, and more specifically, he's a Mort man, one of Voldemort's men in the Ministry. Rufus Scrimgeour is Rufus Grimst. Grim means about the same in Norwegian as in English. Angry, ugly, and or unpleasant. An ST ending indicates being the most of something, so Rufus is the grimmest. Brutus Scrimgeour, on the other hand, is still just named Brutus Scrimgeour. This can be explained by him being a minor character from the Quidditch Through the Ages tie-in book, which was released 2 years prior to the Order of the Phoenix, in which Rufus was introduced. Even though Torstein Bugge Høverstad also translated Quidditch through the ages, he did not change any of the names in that book, as it was supposed to be more of a non-fiction British sports book, so just keeping the original British names fit that much more. Also, I'm sure he didn't have as much time to finish this little side book as he had with the main ones, so he just kept the same names. This with the exception of Sparky, the mascot of the New Zealand Quidditch team, the Motohura Macaws, being renamed Brann. Sparky was probably the exception because his name is basically just a word. Brann means fire, but is also the name of a famous Norwegian football team from Bergen. Anyway, it seems pointless to include any more characters from this book, since you can just look up their British names and they will be the same as the ones in the Norwegian version. So I will not be counting most of them, including Brutus, towards the total of this list. The only exception being Sparky, since his name actually changed, and Dylevelin, that was already counted as one of the completely unchanged names at the start of the video, because a ward at St. Mungo's Hospital was named after him in Order of the Phoenix. Newt Scamander is Salamander Fisle. Salamander means the same in both languages, and is what both Newt and Scamander refers to anyway. But Fisle comes from the Norwegian word Firfirsle, which means lizard. So his full name is Salamander Lizard. His wife is Porpentina Fisle. For the same reason as with Quidditch Through the Ages, I will not include any more characters mentioned in the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them book. The only reason Porpentina made it to the list is because her last name had to be changed due to Newt Scamander being mentioned and translated in one of the main books. And Janus Tickley made it onto the list earlier because Rowling named another hospital ward after him too in Order of the Phoenix. Beadle the Bard is Skalden Skurre. Skald is an Old Norse word for poet, and skurrar is to sound disharmonic or wrong. Høverstad also translated the Tales of Beadle the Bard, but I have decided against counting any of the in-world fictional characters of that book. I can tell you that Babbity Rabbity is called Klumpedumpe, Grumble the Grubby Goat is pretty closely translated to Grufsegeita Grumle, Asha Alteda and Amata's names are spelled Asha Alteda and Amata, Wee Willikins is Lille Willivus, Saber is Knurr, and Sir Luckless is directly translated to Ridder Lykkeløs. But there are some in-world real people introduced in this book. Beatrix Bloxham is Beatrix Bloksberg, from the expression dra til Bloksberg, meaning go to Bloksberg, which means something like go away, I don't believe you. It's very similar, although not entirely the same as the English go to hell, which we also have a direct translation of, dra til helvete. Bloksberg is in reference to Brocken in Germany, sometimes called Bloksberg, which was said to be a meeting ground for witches. Brutus Malfoy is Brutus Malfang, Herbert Berry is Herbert Øllers, Beatrix Bloxham's uncle Nobby is Nuffen, and the titular brothers of the Tale of the Three Brothers are of course based on some in-world historical characters. Antioch Peverell is Antiochus Paffermal. I think the name Paffermal might be a reference to Pimpernel, as in the Scarlet Pimpernel, another main character of a supposedly fictional work. In any case, Pfeffer seems to be an alternative spelling of the German word Pfeffer, meaning pepper, but I'm not sure if this spelling is currently in use or what. Cadmus Peverell is Cadmon Paffermal. Cadmon means primordial in Hebrew. Ignotus Peverell is Dunkert Paffermal. Dunkert is a mix of a now very uncommon first name Dankert and possibly the word dunk, which means to thump or bump. King Henry VI of England is also mentioned in the Tales of Beadle the Bard, but it feels wrong to count him for this list. But it is interesting that he was changed from Henry VI to Henrik IV. Henrik is simply what we call all the King Henrys in Norway, so Henry VIII is Henrik VIII, for example. That might be interesting to look into the reasoning behind someday, but changing him to his grandfather was probably just due to placing the Roman numeral I on the left side of numeral V instead of on the right. Voldemort's daughter Delphine Riddle from the stage play Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, which was also translated by Torstein Bugge Høverstad, is Delphine Venster. Delphine is the Norwegian word for dolphin, but I think this is just an unintended consequence of trying to spell the name more Norwegian. Malfoy's wife, who was also first named in that play, is still named Astoria. Moving on, Stan Shunpike is Swinton Slipperush, mostly so that his nickname could be Svint. Fortere än Svint, or faster than Svint, is a saying that means incredibly fast. Svint comes from the Old Norse word svinir, which means fast, so the saying just means faster than fast. But as far as I'm aware, svint is never actually used outside of that sentence. Sliprush seems to be an English description of the night bus on which he is employed, slipping in and out of traffic and rushing to its destinations. Aurora Sinestra is Aurora Skummel. Skummel means scary. Alicia Spinnet is Alican Spunt. The English spinnet is a person or device that spins yarn or thread, so spunt is probably meant to be short for spunnet, a past tense of spin. Pius Tichenes is Trivius Fjotfjonna. Trivius probably comes from trivelig, meaning pleasant. Fjott means doofus. Fjonne, I'm not sure about. Might just be because it's fun to say Fjotfjonne, but I feel like I'm possibly missing something here. Wilkie Twycross is Wilfram Tvikrok, which basically means hunch. Someone who is tvikrokete is severely hunched over. Romilda Vane is Romilda Vam. A vam is a small valley, cove or nook surrounded by ridges, so that it's barely visible. Corben Yaxley is Eugulus Uxod. He's only called Eugulus in the second chapter of the Half-Blood Prince and is never identified by name in the rest of that book. And for the entirety of the Deathly Hallows, he is only ever identified as Uxod, which is such a cool name for this menacing, high-ranking Death Eater. It also incorporates the letter Ö, which is one of 3 special letters in the Norwegian alphabet, Æ, Ö, and Å. The name sounds a bit like the word Øksehode, which means axe head, which fits his personality perfectly, and it sounds a bit similar to Yaxley too. Eugulus, on the other hand, probably comes from Yuge, one of the many Norwegian dialectal words for lying. While that also fits okay for a Death Eater in hiding, I feel like Yaxley is generally more direct and blunt in his approach, which may be the reason Høverstad moved away from calling him that, if he even remembered that minor character being used previously. The Evans family, which spawned Lily Potter and Petunia Dursley, is named Eving, possibly after the Dortmund city borough in Germany, but maybe more likely after the Norwegian word eving, meaning to doubt. There's a tiny possibility of the name being based on the word evig, meaning forever. An eving would then be someone who is forever, even though I don't think that is an actual word in any dictionary at least. It has never been confirmed by Rowling, even as fans have supposedly hounded her for an answer, that one of Dudley Dursley's victims, named Mark Evans, is of the same Evans family as Lily and Petunia. It is curious then that the Norwegian version of Mark is also called Eving. Sir Patrick Delaney Podmore is Sir Parsifal Halleskum Hestenfjes. Parsifal comes from the Wagner music drama. Halleskum might be Hadeskum, meaning tail foam, and I only believe that is a possibility because Hestenfjes is definitively Hestefjes, meaning horse face. So, you know, tail foam, horse face? Alfard is Alfar. Alfar are a supernatural race from Norse mythology, and the Old Norse word for elves, possibly part of the inspiration for Tolkien's elves from The Lord of the Rings. Basil is Basse. Calling someone Basse is very similar to calling someone Teddy or teddy bear. It's someone big, kind and cuddly. Probably comes from the word Bamse, which means a male bear, with Björn being the word for bears in general, and Björn also being a fairly common male name. Boso is Bums, which is probably in reference to the Norwegian word Boms, which in English means bum, as in a vagrant. Everard is Kronian, which may be linked to the word chronik, meaning chronicle, as Everard reports to Dumbledore about what happens near his various portraits hanging in important wizarding institutions. Malcolm is Marlon, which is not at all a common name in Norway, so it's almost certainly a reference to Marlon Brando, which was also a bit of a bully, I suppose. Bertram Aubrey is Bertram Aule. Aule is a dialectal word that can mean swarm, team, and even pour, generally large quantities of something moving around. Lancelot is Larian. Larian is a name which means crowned with laurel, and laurel wreaths are symbolic for medical care, so that's perfect for a St. Mungo's healer. Millicent Bagnold is Fridoline Barnald. Millicent is a type of rose, and Fridoline is a type of rhododendron. The only thing I could find for Barnald is the Icelandic word for childhood, literally translated as child age. Icelandic is very close to how they used to speak in Norway during the Viking Age, so that probably used to be a word here too. There's also a Bergen creature called Barnald from Bergen Town in the 2020 Trolls Trolltopia series, and as a Bergenser myself, I am deeply offended. Amy Benson is Anna Baffel. While a baffle is the same as a baffle heat transferer, the name probably comes from the word to baffle, which while not used much in Norway, means the same as the English baffle. So you could perhaps say that a baffle is someone who has been baffled. Or maybe it's just a Norwegian word for waffle, waffel, but with a B. Dennis Bishop is Dennis Bisp, which is short for biskop, which is the Norwegian word for bishop. Miles Bletchley is Malton Blair. Malton comes from the English surname and location, and is generally not a first name in real life. A Blair or Blære is someone with an inflated ego, coming from the fact that Blære also means bladder in Norwegian. Stubby Boardman is Knotten Borkman. A knot can mean knob or gnat, but is probably meant to be studs, considering the original name is Stubby. Borkman is probably a reference to John Gabriel Borkman, a play by Henrik Ibsen. Melinda Bobbin is Melinda Bobbel, which is probably in reference to bubble, and not the Norwegian boble, which means bubble, but bobble as in bobbleheads. Broderick Bode is Ulmar Oman. To be Olm means to be angry and seating. Oman means the same as in English. Borgin is Borgia, after the famous Spanish noble family. Carcatis Burke is Caroli Magnus Brust. Caroli Magnus is in reference to Carla Magnus, which was the Norse name for Charlemagne, who was called Carolus Magnus in Latin. Brust could be the past tense for bruse, which means to fizz or fizzle. Or maybe it's a sound-alike to bryst, which means chest, as in the part of the body. Bradley is Bramling, which may be named after the hamlet in Kent. There's also a type of hops named Bramling Cross, which I feel might be relevant because of Humlesnurr also being named after hops. Cadwallader is cantarelle. A cantarelle is a delicious type of mushroom known as a chanterelle or girole in English. Eddie Carmichael is Edin Carmelius. Edin is a not at all common man's name, which I'm pretty sure Høverstad got from the Norwegian author Edin Holme. Carmelius may be in reference to the extremely uncommon names Carmi, Carmyl or Carmelius, but I feel like I'm possibly missing a hidden meaning here. Herbert Chorley is Herbert Fumlie. The only idea I have for Fumlie is the word fumle, meaning fumble, but that seems maybe like a stretch too. Cole is kolle. A kolle means something without growths on it, usually used for either a hillock without much vegetation or for the female members of animal types where the males grow horns. Richard Coote is Richard Klang, as in the sound, although the word klang is actually spelled with a K in Norwegian. Elfrida Cragg is Elfrida Kragg. It seems very likely that Cragg is a misspelling of Clag, since Elfrida Cragg is mentioned in the Order of the Phoenix as having a portrait hanging in the Ministry of Magic, and Elfrida Clag would certainly be worthy of such an honor, in which case the Norwegian translation would have been Clag with a K. But since we are only counting characters in the main Harry Potter books for this list, Crag is actually the correct spelling, with all other instances of Clag being misspellings, since only Crag is present in the main books. All this to justify why I'm using a picture of Clag to represent Crag here. Croaker is kverker. To kverke something is to crush it, but to kverke someone is to kill them. So it's that definition of croaking that was translated. Doris Crockford is Doris Krukkeback, which is very close to be directly translated as krukke is jar and back is stream. Barnabas Cuff is Barabbas Channing. A Channing is someone you or someone else knows, which is very on the nose considering this is one of the many people Slughorn knows. Hector Dagworth Granger is Hector Duberman Grang, Duberman like the dog. Caradoc Dearborn is Caspar Diligant, which might just be meant to be the English word diligent, because the closest word we have in Norwegian is delegant, which means the same as the English word. Bowl is Bang, and Derek is Drønne, meaning this pair of Slytherin Quidditch beaters are basically called Bang and Rumble. Dillis Dervent is Dilly Diddly, and Diddly Dee is kinda like a common Norwegian scat line. Harold Dingle is Harball Dingle. Avoiding the obvious pick of Harald, a hårball is the same as a hairball. In combination with Dingle, that brings to mind a dangling hairball, which seems unsavory. Emma Dobbs is Emma Grull. Not sure if Grull relates to grill, gull, which means gold, or gru, which means dread, or none of the above. Mary Dorkins is Marte Durken. Durken means the floor, particularly in rooms in ships and trains, usually used when describing someone falling hard to the floor. The more common word for floor is gulv. Bungee is yndi. Yndig can mean cute, pretty, graceful, adorable, and other similar synonyms. Ambrosius flume is Ambrosius flomme, which means to flow heavily. Florian Fortescue is Florian Funkel, which is probably from the German word funkel, meaning sparkling. And Dexter Fortescue is Dalarian Funkel. Gibbon is Gissik. Unsure about this, but Gissik translates to the word nothing in the Basque language. It's also close to the Norwegian word gisse, which is a common nickname for pigs, which fits with the animal connection to his original name Gibbon. Golpalott is gulpomkapp. Omkapp generally means some sort of race. Kjøre-omkapp, spise-omkapp, rydde-omkapp, gå-omkapp, anything. Omkapp seems to have its origin in the Old Norse kappestrid, meaning cape battle, generally meaning a competition. Means about, so the phrase just means competition about walking, or competition about driving, and so on. But in modern times, the phrase is completely linked with speed. The gulp in each name is meant to mean gulp, which is fitting for a potion maker. And that means that the full meaning of the Norwegian name is gulping race. Miranda Gosshawk is Miranda Hønshøk, which is an intentional misspelling of the word hønshøk, also known as hønsehauk, which is the Norwegian name for Eurasian goshawks. Høns means hens, so we think of goshawks as taking hens instead of geese in Norway. Gladys Gudgeon is Agnes Fjolles. The word fjollete means silly, usually to describe a person. This can be used both positively and negatively. Ciceron Harkis is Ciceron Krummeltapp. Krumme means to bend something, often your back. Tap means loss. Not sure if this fits the character or not, because we don't really know that much about this guy. Harper is harpoon, the Norwegian word for harpoon. Warty Harris is Vorta Humpel, which is more like warty bumpy. Bertie Higgs is Bertus Bulter. Hulter til bulter is a Norwegian phrase that means an unorganized mess. Like you could have a lot of clothes hulter til bulter on your floor. And Terris Higgs is Terris Bulter. Geoffrey Hooper is Herman Holland, which just sounds fun, or at most is a reference to the country of Holland. Inigo Imago is Figaro Imago, after Figaro from The Barber of Seville. Arsenius Jigger is Arsenius Nubbe, which is a small dram of alcoholic liquid. Jugson is Juxom. To jukse means to cheat at something. Andrew Kirk is Andor Krikkbukk. Krikke is an old horse. Bukk, while also meaning buck, and to bow, is here meant as the Norwegian word for a pommel horse. My guess is that Krikkbukk is an old name for pommel horse that neither I nor the internet is aware of, and that it has evolved to just being called bukk many years ago. Libaceous borage is Nectarius bulme. Nectarius is nectar, the Norwegian word for nectar. Bulme means to swell. For some reason, Morag McDougal is Morag MacDonald, and I'm loving it. Laura Madley is Laura Mandelblom, which means almond flower, although blomst with an st ending is a much more common word for flower. Mason is murpuss. Murpuss means plaster, something a mason would use. Jim McGuffin is John Bygeby. A byge is a rain shower, which is fitting since he's a television weatherman. By means city, but is also just a semi-common suffix for surnames. That's a pretty good tongue twister, by the way. Semi-common suffix for surnames. Yeah, that took me a lot of tries to get out. Marlene McKinnon is Marlene McMaster. Master means master. Dorcas Meadows is Dorte Merkelin, and merkelig means strange. Araminta meliflua is Araminta oratoria. In English and Italian, oratoria is the art of speaking well in public. Galatia Merithot is Galatea munn-til-munn. Munn-til-munn-metoden is the mouth-to-mouth method. Montgomery is Mondelin. Might be a mix of the word mandolin and the uncommon word mundan, meaning elegance and luxury. I think this makes sense because Montgomery also sounds a bit like a rich person's name. Moon is morning, which is an uncommon conjugation of moon. Morning means to expose oneself to moonlight, so you can understand why the word is uncommon. Translating it directly back to English, you'd get mooning, so that may be the actual meaning Høverstad intended. Mortlake is Myrdelius, where myrde means to murder. Adrian Pusey is Adrian Plum, which may be short for plomme, the Norwegian word for plum. Speaking of, Mulciber is multiplum, for even more plums. Multiplum is also a math term, the same as the English multiple. Erik Munch is Erik Drøv, which can mean drowsy, but is probably here in reference to cud, the partially digested food that cows munch on. Og is Upsan, which sounds like Upsan, which is Norwegian for oopsie. Jimmy Peaks is Jannik Pigtil. A pig is a spike, but pig can also mean to be awake and lively. Till just means 2 or 4. Not sure about this one, but since his original name is Peaks, maybe his new surname is meant to mean spikes 4, climbing, like pythons. Perkins is Pudelman, which means poodleman. Archie Philpott is Archie Philipput. Philipput was a theatrical music review from 1961. Piers Polkis is Simeon Smalkus. A smell is a hard hit or collision, so this could be a reference to him beating up people as part of Dudley's bully gang. Roddy Pontner is Rundolf Styr. Styr means hassle or hubbub, but if you are holding styr, then you are keeping track of something. Ernie Prang is Pistil Prang, while a pistil is a pestle, as in mortar and pestle, and prange means being eye-catching. I think this name is just supposed to sound like pistol pang, pang being the Norwegian word for bang, the sound a pistol makes. Prentice is prent, which used to mean something that has been printed, like a newspaper. The word print has taken over in Norway now as well. Fabian Pruitt is Fabian Prunk, which means excessive splendor, and Gideon Pruitt is Gideon Prunk. Graham Pritchard is Goffen Prask. There's a few possible explanations to the name Prask. There's the word trask, which is the Norwegian word for trapes. There's also the word rask, if you remove the P, which means fast. And the word brask, meaning brash. We don't know much about this Slytherin student, so we can only guess at the correct explanation. Proudfoot is kneising, which is to proudly hold your head high. Savage is vilt. Vilt means wild. Doris Perkis is Doris Pirk. Pirk means to pick, prod and fiddle with something. Augustus Pye is Gustus Fynk. Since pie is supposed to be short for magpie, I think fink is meant to be fink, the Norwegian word for a finch. Orla Quirk is Olette Kvalar. In book speech, kvalar with a K is a word for a strong physical or psychological pain. In New Norwegian, kvalar means whales. Urquhart is Urkebart. Urke is both a village in Ørsta in Norway and an Old English term meaning irk, to irritate or annoy. Bart means mustache, so I'm clocking the full name as annoying mustache. Urquhart Rackharrow, on the other hand, is Knödel Streckback Piene. Knödel is possibly meant to be the German bread dumplings called Knödel. A streckbank is a torture instrument known as a rack in English. Piene is close to pine, which means pain, which is also why Mr. Pain is called Herr Piene. Gawain Roberts is Groff Rovart. Groff is almost gruff, which means the same in English and Norwegian. Rovart is close to røver, which means robber. Evan Rosier is Alman Rosinius. Rosin is the Norwegian word for raisin. Wilbert Slinkard is Wilbert Snisk. Snisk may be a mix of a number of different words. Sneak, smisk, snusk, snask, and probably more that I can't even think of, and I have no idea what the correct answer here is. Jack Sloper is Jonny Slumper, meaning to be slumped over. Hippocrates Smetwick is Hippocrates Smetvink. To smette is to quickly slip in and out of somewhere, and vinke means to wave. There are two different Stebbinses in the Harry Potter books. One attended Hogwarts in the 70s and was translated to snurke, which is very close to snorke, the Norwegian word for snoring. Snurke is also the Sami word for pig. The Sami are an indigenous people living in northern Norway and Sweden, Finland and Russia. The other Stebbins attended Hogwarts in the 90s and was translated to stubbe, which means tree stump. And his Christmas ball date was faucet, which was translated to fallar, which means falls. Billy Stubbs is Billy Stubben, which is specifically that or the tree stump. Patricia Stimson is Myrmelin Stimp. Stump is close to stump, which is Norwegian for a short last piece of something, be it bread or a cigarette. It is also a cutesy way of saying ass. Myrmelin might be a mix of the first name Irmelin and a place called Myrmel. Summerby is Somerset, which seems to just be the surname Somerset, but with the Norwegian spelling of summer. Tofti is Tufte, which means to lay a foundation. There's also a famous Norwegian rower named Olaf Tufte. Kenneth Towler is Kendrian Tutler. To tutle or tusle means to walk in a shy, slow and careful way. Quentin Trimble is Quintus Skjelven. To be skjelven means to be shaky, either from fear or cold. Lisa Turpin is Lisa Turpin. A turpin is something you'd call someone who is boring, and it literally means dry stick. Dolores Jane Umbridge is Wenche Dolorosa Uffert. Uff is an onomatopoeia used to express dismay. It is well known by Scandinavian Americans in the US as part of the phrase ufta, which means uften. It could be said that someone who says uff a lot is an uffert. Wacy is Valkan. A valk is a fold of skin or fabric, and the word is usually used for rolls of fat around your waist. Adelbert Waffling is Adalbert Vingling. Someone or something vinglete is wobbly, but it can also mean that they are indecisive, leaning back and forth between one side and the other. Celestina Warback is Celestina Charmant. Just like Warback is pretty close to warlock, Charmant is pretty close to shaman, which is the Norwegian word for shaman. Warrington is Vold. Vold means violence. Eric Wally is Erik Valland. Valland means whale country. Kevin Whitby is Kent Virring. To virre is to move somewhat randomly and erratically around. Willy Withershins is Krimian Kverve. Krimian indicates to me someone who is involved with crime, and I'll link it to the outdated word kriminal, obviously meaning criminal, which has been replaced by the word kriminell. Kverve has at least two meanings. The first is to surround. The other is basically gaslighting, getting someone to see things as other than what they are. Will is Willy, which is weird because there's a theory among fans that this is just Mundungus Fletcher shortening Willy Withershins' name to Will. But as mentioned, that character is Krimian Kverve. So, in the Norwegian version at least, these are two different characters. Wilkes is winter, which sounds like winter, the Norwegian word for winter. Williamson is whistling. Whistling basically means hissing. Eldred Warple is Eldar Waffle. The closest I could come on this is just another variation on waffle. Aragog is Argrap. Arg means angry. Rap is a quick smack, usually with a stick or a similar object. Ripper is glafs. Glafs, in this context, is a word specifically referring to a dog snapping at something with its teeth. Golgomath is Golgorosk. Rusk might be Røsk, which means to rip, which could be fitting considering he decapitated Carcass. Fox is Vulkan, Vulkan being the Norwegian word for volcano. Binky is fluff, which means the same in English as in Norwegian. Tenebrous is Tenebros, a minor change, but possibly because the word brus means soda, and that would kind of be too silly to be part of the name of a test roll. Sanguini is Blodini. We don't really have a good translation for the word sanguine in Norway, so going with blod, the Norwegian word for blood, was a good choice. Joey Jenkins is Jokke Jensen. Jokke is a common nickname for people with the name Joachim. Archie Alderton is Almar Olderman. An Olderman is an old-timey word for chairman, with the word forman having now taken over. Hattie Baylis is Hattie Bump, which also means the same in English as in Norwegian. Angus Fleet changed his name to Angus MacAngus, and also moved from Peebles to Glasgow for some reason. Egbert the Egregious is Egbert den Extreme, whereas egregious is mostly used to mean extremely bad. His Norwegian title simply means Egbert the Extreme. Godlot is Gomerek, which seems to reference Emeric the Evil, another owner of the Elder One. Go is the Norwegian word for good, although the character was considered quite unpleasant. Hereward is Herover, which means over here. Barnabas Deveril is Barabbas de Sprell. Barabbas was probably named after the biblical character, and Sprell means antics or flailing about. Humphrey Belcher is Humpertus Rap. Humper is humping, and Rap means burp, making his name Humpingtus Burp. Betty Brightwhite is Billa Brektveit. Billa means beetle, Brek means bleat, and Tveit can be an old Viking farm or an open area inside a forest. Ivor Dillingsby is Ivar Dillardal. Ivar means eagerness. Dilla can mean messing about with something, or hanging and messing around generally. Dal means valley, and is a very common suffix for surnames and locations, what with all the Norwegian mountains. Colonel Fubster is Oberst Fubbel. Fubbel might be Swedish slang for being clumsy, or is possibly just a Norwegianization of Fubster. Hengist of woodcraft is hengist fra krattbøl. A kratt is the same as a thicket, as in a shrub thicket or thorn thicket. A bøle is an area where people and or animals gather and live. Bøl is a semi-common suffix for locations in Norway. So since the only part of his name that has been changed is where he comes from, Høverstad has effectively changed the nationality of the founder of Hogsmeade, and I think this is the only character he has done this for. Alberic Grunnian is Alberic Grunning, which means groundwork or foundation, often used for the first coat of paint and the like. Sørk is kirke, which is the Norwegian word for church. Ptolemy is Ptolemeus, which are both names used for the same real-life Alexandrian mathematician, although usually spelled Ptolemaeus, whereas Britain often anglicized names for ancient historical figures. Norway would usually keep the Greek or Latin versions of the names. Davy Gudgeon is David Dusmer, which pretty much means dopey. The sorting hat is valghatten, which can be translated as both the choice hat and the decision hat, which is a fitting double meaning since the hat's decision can be influenced by the student's choice. Madame Puddifoot is Madame Puslefoot. Pusle means to gently work with or move something small. It may have some relation to the English word puzzle in one way or another. Fot is just a Norwegian word for foot. Vindictus viridian is vendettus grønn, after the words vendetta and grønn, which means green. Barnabas the Barmy is Salto den skjøre. Skjør means fragile, and salto is the same as a somersault, which is presumably what he did involuntarily when the trolls he was teaching ballet to clubbed him to death. Gregory the Smarmy is Gregorius den glatte. Glatt means smooth, in every meaning of the word. Wendelin the Weird is Wendelin Villråde. Villråde is a variation on the word rådvill, which means to be at a loss. Lackland the Lanky is Sildrian den Slåpne. Sildrian is similar to the word slendrian, which is a lazy, work-shy person. But drian is a suffix indicating a person who exemplifies the prefix. And the seal prefix that has replaced the slen for this name is a reference to the saying tynn som en sil, which means as thin as a sand eel. Although the word seal also means sieve, and as that is a much more common use for the word, I think a lot of Norwegians think that the phrase means as thin as a sieve. I certainly did before I thought about it for this video. Slåpne means slouchy and nonchalant, so the full name put together sort of makes up the description of a lanky person. Wilfred the Wistful is Smaldrian den Smektende. Smal means narrow or thin. Smektende means languishing, which I feel is just a particular flavor of wistful. Harry and Ginny's children from the epilogue are all named after other characters from the series, so their name changes are just based on those characters' name changes. James Sirius Potter is Jacob Sirius Potter. Lily Luna Potter is Lily Lula Potter, and Albus Severus Potter has already been counted at the beginning of this video, because his name was completely unchanged. Rose Granger Weasley is Rosa Grang Wiltersen. Hugo Granger Weasley is Hugo Grang Wiltersen. Victoria Weasley is Victoria Wiltersen. Teddy Lupin is Teddy Lupus. And finally, Scorpius Malfoy is Scorpio Malfang. But let's finish this video off with a quick bonus round of translations that are not character names, but were just too good for me to not let you know about. The word for goblin used in the Norwegian version is gnome, which of course means gnome. This is because Norway doesn't really have a good word for goblin. Goblins are probably closer to small trolls from Norwegian folklore than to gnomes, but you wouldn't exactly think trolls would be a good fit for running a bank. The Weird Sisters band is called Skumle Søstre, which means scary sisters. The members of the band were never actually named in the books, so I will not be covering them. The Hogsmeade shop Dervish and Bangs is Dervish og Bang, but it's not clear if Dervish and Bangs are the people who started the store or names of objects they sell and repair. As such, I could not include them in the main list. And then we had the Norwegian word for muggles. The English word stems from an old Kentish word for tail. Since most of the muggles we see in the first book are meant to be unsympathetic, Høverstad went with the name Gumper. Change the G-O with R-U and you'll get Rumper, meaning asses. The word originates from the Norse gumpur, and you can still find gump in dictionaries as a word to describe tail feathers of a bird, even though the word halefjær is much more commonly used. Gump is also the Norwegian word for a singular muggle, alongside with a famous type of Norwegian candy. Hogwarts is directly translated to Galtvort, and Hogsmeade is Galtvang. The diagonal alley is Diagonalallmenningen, and the leaky cauldron is Den lekke heksekjel, specifically mentioning that the cauldron belongs to a witch, hex being the Norwegian word for witch. Little Whinging is Søndre Syting, which means South Whinging, and Privet Drive is Hekkeveien, which means Hedge Road. While galleon coins are translated directly to gallionar, and sickles are translated directly to sigdar, knuts are renamed to fjong, probably because Knut is a very normal Norwegian boy's name. The Norwegian word fjong means fancy, so translating that back again, there are 29 fancies to a sickle and 17 sickles to a galleon. Spew, the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, is renamed to HIK, which acronym is the Norwegian word for hiccups and spells out Husnissenes Internasjonale Kampkoalisjon, which roughly translates to the House Elves International Combat Coalition. I also think that hiccups is a slightly more respectful name for an anti-slavery group than Spew is, so I'm glad that Høverstad softened the joke here, even if it was just to make the acronym work. The pensive is called a tanketank, literally a think tank. Quidditch is rumpeldunk. If I were to translate this word directly, I would just go with ass pound. But I read a blog post written by Høverstad where he mentioned that he gave Quidditch the name rumpeldunk because it's an exhausting ball game. But unless it's related to the word rumpeballe again that I mentioned back with poor Neville, I'm not really sure how that's relevant to the name. The chasers at least are just directly translated to jagere. And the keeper is still called a keeper in Norway, just like in football, or soccer as they would call it in America. The beaters are named knakkere, with knakke being a word that I've never heard before, that supposedly means to beat repeatedly. And then the seeker is a speider, which maps onto all definitions of the English word scout. A bludger is called a club, which means a slap. The quaffle is a sluff, which I can't explain, but it at least sounds like something sloppy and worn down. And then the golden snitch is called gullsnoppen. If I ended up using this thumbnail, you might have been thinking, surely not, this has to be clickbait. But no, snoppen is indeed a slang term for a penis, usually used very playfully, rarely in a sexual manner, more likely to be used by a new parent than by a lover. And it sounds like something rather small too, like the golden snitch. But even looking up snop in online dictionaries, I found both penis and kuk listed as definitions, with kuk being the Norwegian word for cock. So in all seriousness, in the Norwegian version of Harry Potter, Harry is several times chasing the golden cock, and snatches it quite a few times as well. The mirror of Erised is called speilemørd. Mørd is very close to mord, which means murder, so the name is much more sinister in Norwegian, but it is also the word drøm spelled backwards, which means dream. So mørd was a very evocative and descriptive name choice for that mirror. And finally, chapter 13 of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, in English called The Secret Riddle, is in Norwegian called Tom eller full av faen. While Tom is a name, Tom is also the Norwegian word for empty. Alla means or, full is full, av means off, and faen is probably the most popular swear word in all of Norway. It originates from the word fanden, which is an old Norwegian word for the devil, but it is mostly deployed as our version of saying fuck. So that chapter title can be read as empty or full of devilishness, Tom or full of devilishness, or even empty or full of fuck. I've seen it reported several places online that there are over 700 characters in the Harry Potter books. But as far as I could see, you'd have to include all unnamed characters and even count every single pseudonym and nickname as a separate character to get that number. Still, it's entirely possible that I missed a few, so please let me know in the comments if you can think of any, and I'll reply with the translated version for you. Now, this video took quite some time to research. I found several different lists of Norwegian character names online, but none of them were even close to complete. So I had to cross-reference everything and then go book diving for the rest. The best, but still incomplete list I found, I had to use the internet Wayback Machine to access, as the link I found had long been inactive. But even the English lists were incomplete, although not as badly as the Norwegian ones. And it also took quite some time to weed out names that were not from any of the books. The Harry Potter fandom wiki, for example, is great for listing where characters show up, but not where their names are actually used. Sometimes a character is just described, and we learn what they are called much later, and sometimes only part of their name is used. So using the wiki was helpful, but it still took a lot of searching through the Norwegian books to find the translated names. And the fact that the Norwegian subtitles for the movies translated some of the names differently than what the books did also complicated my research. And all that before even getting started at explaining and researching the meanings behind the names. I learned through making this video that Google Translate is absolutely useless and makes major mistakes as often as it gets things correct. And then of course it took a lot of time to cobble the video itself together too. There are 1328 image files for the name cards alone, for a total of 4.8 gigabytes. Most of the character portraits I used were official depictions of the characters from various media, lifted directly from their Harry Potter wiki pages. But for some of them, I had to get creative. Did you spot all the cameos and references? Let me know in the comments. I also started by using a font that eventually turned out to not properly represent the Norwegian special letter Ø, which is an issue when trying to introduce words using it to an international audience. So I had to manually fix each and every instance of it, since it was way too late to just change the font. That's over 70 Øs in total, if my script is to be believed. Same with capital letter Q's as well, but that wasn't as big of a deal. The point I'm trying to make is that this was an incredibly time-consuming video to make. Like all of my available free time for over half a year, keeping in mind I have a job, partner and kids. So if you got any enjoyment out of it, please like, comment, subscribe and share the video. All that good stuff. And if this video does well, maybe I'll do a follow-up. There are so many good translations of spells, objects, locations, nicknames and so on. And Torstein Bugge Høvastad also translated a whole bunch of other books, like The Lord of the Rings for example, so let me know if that's of interest to anyone. And I've also got a ton of other fun video ideas, so please consider supporting my Patreon to get your name in the credits, and so that I could possibly make a lot more videos much more quickly by possibly doing this full-time or even part-time. If you watched all of this, or even if you just skipped around a bit, thank you. You've made the effort worth it. See you next time, buddy.